Hi, I'm Jenny Antlak, President of Learning Journeys,
And I'm Terza Lewis, Director of Creative Development for Learning Journeys.
and we welcome you today. Today's session is on being, shifting our being. And as you look at your world, every single second of every moment, you are picking up information, and we are translators of that information. And we put them in, as we talked about last time, kind of these filing systems. And we create stories of experiences we have, and then even the new experiences get filed into those old stories, or the story files, so to speak. And if we aren't making meaning of something, somebody else is doing it for us.
So true.
And from the time we are little, our families, our friends, the schools we go to, all of that, they have efficiently given us meaning along the way. And so then when something new comes along, we oftentimes don't question it. We're like, oh, our brain decides that's where it goes. Remember that file you had on this? That, even though it's a little different, you should put it there.
Right. And then we operate out of that, and we kind of go through, and that gets back to what we were talking about earlier in the previous session about just our habit nature, right? So what we want to do is just talk about actually exactly that, the four ways that we carry these narratives. And there's probably many more, but we're just going to highlight these four for the sake of time and for the sake of the fact that I think they really capture the majority of what we walk with. And that first one is habit. So whatever fires first, wires first, right? In other words, whatever came first kind of takes up space and residence and stakes its claim in our mind, and our autopilot will kick in and divert this information right back toward that file. And those grooves, those neurological pathways, over and over again, just become more and more developed, and stronger. And we put things in that file, and it becomes our habit nature. And so we don't necessarily even think about all the ramifications or just the ways it's impacting this action or this thought or this assumption impacts us, because it is now habit.
Yeah, I think about even something so simple as in grade school. Well, not that this changed, but in grade school, I was humiliated once because there was the in classroom spelling bee, and I flubbed it up on a super easy word, and that fired first, and it wired is everybody's going to think you're stupid. And so anytime that I flub something up, I immediately go to, oh, they're going to think I'm stupid, even though I have all kinds of evidence that says, no, you're not stupid. But it's part of my habit to go there first.
Yeah.
I think that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
The other one that causes us not to question is the sense of belonging, is that we have such an innate need to belong with others, to be accepted, to not be judged, to feel like we are in a safe space and that people are not going to abandon us. That if we see something different or experience something different that doesn't go with what everybody else is saying around us, we will pick up that story that everyone else is saying. Not always, but if it is so innate in us to belong and it trumps everything else, we will take that and say, oh, I'm not going to question it. It must be me. I must not be seeing what they're seeing.
Absolutely. I had a story all teed up for this, and I'm totally going to change it. Because what you just said and the way you said that reminded me about my journey on Facebook as an entrepreneur. So it was so interesting. I did not want to approach Facebook as a medium for how I shared the work that I do, because I felt known in a particular way by a lot of my family members, extended family, people that I grew up with, church people, etc.
Right.
And I knew that the person that I was attempting to become and that I wanted to be in my job in this role of coach and coach trainer, etc., is very open and very vulnerable and has ways of thinking that felt really different from the way that I was brought up. So
Mhm.
I fought for about 2 years. I was like, that's not where I'm growing. I'm not growing on that platform. No way. And from about November till now, I've just opened myself up a lot on that platform. And just today I did something on entrepreneurial depression. Like that was the the topic of it. And I was just like, are you really gonna put this out there?
Mhm.
Because I know that it's so different than, and I don't even have necessarily all of their feedback to tell me. I just have this understanding in my mind of what it takes to belong in this particular social framework. And part of it says that you always come with your best. You
Mhm.
don't ever come looking broken or being vulnerable. People don't have time for that. That's not how they want to see you. And so it took literally 2.5 years to get to the place where I said, the message that I want to bring is more important than this tape that I'm playing about belonging in my head.
Right. Well, and I think that piece of, and this is another area that we rarely question if we are trying to hold true to it, is this becoming piece. And we have rules around it that become habit in
Mhm.
itself, and then we won't question anything. So so even in that example of becoming, you what well, I was gonna conclude something that'd be so not coach like. And but for you, Terza,
Mhm.
what rules in the becoming did you first not question?
Yeah. I, okay, this is actually really good. Um, the first rule that I didn't question was that you show up one way in some spaces, and that's allowed, but you dare not show up this way in other spaces. So there
Mhm.
was this rule that I've had for a long time, I think from probably junior high, high school, around that age, about compartmentalizing yourself.
Mhm.
You know, you show up one way here, and you show up one way here, and you show up one way here, and you have to hold all these different like images of yourself. And you have to hold all of them well. And then as I grew up and got older, it gets harder and harder to hold all of those. Like it is a basket full of different versions of yourself. And the rule, but it was so hard for me to say, could there be a different rule that says I get to just be me in every situation? And I think one of the things that was even challenging was when I even began to entertain switching that rule and putting that rule down or those assumptions down, I had to first even figure out who I was. Like, if I'm going to do that, oh my gosh, who am I that I'm saying gets the privilege of being experienced by everyone everywhere the same way?
Right. Well, and we talk about this in narrative too, this piece of uh, we anchor ourselves in all these stories and they become our identity. And then when we decide, wait a second, I'm going to start questioning those stories because I don't know that's truly me.
Mm-hmm.
But then to let go of those stories and be storyless is really scary. And then how often did you want to just run back to the old stories versus trying to figure out who you are so you could pick up new stories?
At least twice every 6 months. But I don't even regret that though, because that's part of the process. Sometimes we'll have Students who will ask, like, what if I've got a coachee and they just keep going around this one thing over and over and over? I try not to assume right away that they're not making progress,
Mm.
because sometimes it takes a lot of laps and experiencing and then re-upping your commitment to becoming
Mm.
over and over and over, saying, no, it's worth it. No, there's something here. Nope, I can't give this up. Nope, this talks to my values. Whatever it is that they've got to say each and every time. Because I'll tell you, this last time was earlier this year. And I looked at the situation and I was like, no, like finally that option no longer felt like it fit in any scenario. And
Right.
that was when I felt like, hey, I'm free of this. That's no longer who I am. But it takes a while.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. That's why when people sit there and say, you just have to do this,
Mhm.
what they dismiss is all the stories that upheld their current identity. And so you're not just changing this, you're changing all the stories.
Yeah. Which I think actually talks to number 4, exposure, is that if you never get the opportunity to do that type of work, then we don't realize why it's so difficult,
And
why it's so challenging. Is that where do people get the opportunity or the exposure to sit outside of their story long enough to decide whether or not it's actually theirs?
yeah, in grad school, there's very few things I remember for something that cost me so much money. Uh, but there was this term of model the way. And what I liked about the term, well, I still like the term, is that if it's never modeled to us, that we can be curious, that we can question what we
Mhm.
see and ask, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
What if everybody's wrong?
I love that. And it actually just reminded me of, I had a session with a group of women coaches last year. And one of the ladies was talking about her experience, like being like first in her neighborhood or her family to go to college, and the dissonance or the disconnect from some of her age mates, some of her peers in the family,
Mhm.
and how one of the elders pulled her aside and said, you know what? I know that it seems like they just keep dogging you, but the reality is they need to see you do this
Mm.
so that they know that it's possible. And so what they're doing is projecting a lot of their fear onto you, because they're just like, can she be successful? Can she actually do this? Because then maybe I can as well, because she was their version of exposure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so then so we'll just make it a little harder
A
for
little tougher. Make sure you really want it, right?
her. Yes.
Yeah. Before we continue on, Jenny, I do want to mention that, last session, the first session of this being series was about the realization that we make meaning out of everything. And we encouraged people to uh, just take a look at their shoes
Mm.
and what meaning they were making as they chose their shoes for the day, or what they were thinking about, like how that would influence how they walked in the world, or what they wanted those shoes to say. And so I want to remind people that underneath, when they back out of the session, that there's a space for comments, and we'd love to hear your comments on what you got out of the last session. So don't forget to post there or connect with us on LinkedIn. We love hearing from you on LinkedIn about what you've learned so far in these different courses.
Yeah. And in that experiment, what we really were inviting everybody to pay attention to is, who am I in relation to self?
Mhm.
Who am I in relation to others? Like, how I show up and how I perceive the world and perceive you.
Mhm.
And how does that influence you? And how does it influence how you see me? And then who am I in relationship to the world? And how does that influence how we feel inside of a space, how we interact inside of a space? All of that, can we pay attention to that? But it doesn't have to be complicated. And that's why we chose shoes.
Right.
Is that, can we raise our awareness just a tiny bit and it have profound insight for us?
Mhm.
Which goes to this next piece, is that when we are entering our world, and no matter what shoes we have on, or clothes, or words we use, or how we are being in our world, we are doing that based on what we think the world wants of us, what they expect of us most of the time. And so there is a great quote by David White that says, "We shape ourselves to fit the world. The world responds, and we shape ourselves again." And to really pay attention to, what are you thinking are the expectations of you? And then as you shape yourself to go out in the world, what do you pick up on that says you're meeting those or you're failing at them?
Mhm.
And then what tells you to shape again? Or are you confident enough to say, no, I'm good?
Mhm.
And I
And some
think
people have that right away. They have that confidence. And some of us, I think we just have to, um, keep reminding ourselves.
Yeah. And I think your example earlier of putting yourself out there on Facebook, how many times did you try to shape yourself to a certain expectation, and then finally you got to, wait a second, this is a lot of shaping.
Right.
I gotta figure out who I am. And that's really what it is can we start from the place of, who do I want to be in the world? And can I actually influence the world, rather than taking on the assumption that I have to meet other people's expectations, or the world expectations of me? And then do I actually lose control in that, when the control is there for us if we choose to pick it up?
Yeah. I love that. The control is there for us if we choose to pick it up. Um, if you haven't already downloaded the worksheet for this session, I'm going to encourage you to pause this video and do so, and you can follow through on the worksheet with us. Or, if you're driving or whatnot and just listening, go ahead and, as soon as you get time, spend about 7 minutes with this worksheet. But Jenny and I are going to talk through this because it really can be a matter of choice and how I am choosing to shift my being in the world. So Jenny, before we get started, we have to have something to chew on. And
Mhm.
so I'm going to ask you, the easiest of questions. Who do you want to be in your world, Jenny?
Should I answer in the same tone?
Yeah.
Thank you for asking. Uh, who I want to be is, I want to show up in a way that is playful, and that gives me the freedom to screw it up royally, but also tells other people that they can just be themselves too. And I think inside of that is uh, being the person that does model the way that it's inside. This is from a story that I wrote a long time ago, but it is inside of the mess that the magic is born. And can I be that person that models that every day?
Mhm. How long have you held on to that understanding of where the magic is born?
How long have I held on to it? For many, many years. Do I forget it?
Mhm.
Equally as much.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's great. So we'll work with this then. Um, so we have two sides of the chart here. This first box is about assumptions versus curiosity. And I'm just curious about where you hang out. Do you tend to hang out in assumptions or in being curious about new realities?
It really depends on where my headspace is and what I'm doing. I have a story that I am a horrible networker. And so situations like that, I
Mhm.
will go to, nobody's going to talk to me.
Okay.
And yet when I can shift that into the curiosity, then I'm like, huh, what cool things can I meet? Or what cool things can I learn from people that I've never met before?
Mm-hmm. that kind of gets to my next column here, is about what we fixate on versus what we notice is actually working. So
Mm.
I'm curious about both, actually. What do you fixate on? You kind of mentioned a little bit of that, but how do you shift to notice what is actually working?
Well, I think I fixate on um, the pieces that somehow it's a bad reflection on me,
Okay.
and 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 then I feel like, oh, I need to I need to go rescue this. But when I notice the days that I don't do that, and I can notice what is working, it I'm in a place of contribution versus conclusion, and it's all about something I screwed up.
Mm-hmm. So our next column there is about outcome versus experience. And I always want to ask the question about experience. So I'm gonna go to that one. But um, when you're in that, and when you're one way versus the other, how do you experience the situation differently?
Mm. When I'm in outcome mindset, I actually make more mistakes because I'm hyper focused on destination. When I'm in the experience, I'm all about it, allows for pivoting. I want this experience. I want everybody to have fun. I want everybody to um, be engaging. And so it gives me the freedom to be like, oh, well, let's try this. Let's try this. When I'm in outcome, it's almost like it narrows my focus, and there's only one way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you're anticipating the pain of that problem and you're focused on outcome, what is it that you're trying to protect?
I think judgment. I'm afraid that people are going to judge me, and they're going to say, well, she runs this company and she can't figure this out. And so I'm trying to protect an image, yet I think I'm tarnishing it in the process because I keep like picking up all these things, and I can't hold them all.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see possibility inside of that dilemma?
When I've hit the wall and I know like there is there's no other option, but I can't give up. That's not part of, I'm not hardwired that way. So I'm like, okay, it's telling me, yeah, turn around. You got to do this differently. You have to find something. But I also can get to possibility when I look at all the people around me uh, that really uphold possibility too.
Mm-hmm. My last question, on working our way through the chart here, is how do I ask this? Well, I'm curious about when you're in those moments and you're trying to control the situation, what cues you that it's time to shift being and dance in the moment?
Mm-hmm. So the control piece is that I want it to look a certain way.
Okay.
And yet what cues me to dance in the moment is when I can pick up from the people around me that I've just lost control.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's just gonna, I have to recalibrate, and I have to give it up and be like, oh, what else is here? I guess I need to just let that go and and go right back to all those other categories that are on the right-hand side of what is inviting me to be curious to right now.
And when you're in those categories on the right-hand side, what kind of dance are you doing?
Terza, you know me, I like the do-si-do, the square dance. I gotta promenade my partner.
Oh, nice. Oh,
The
thank you.
gym class paid off.
You know, I don't, do they still do that?
I doubt it.
Yeah, it was kind of the world's most interesting social experiment done with junior high schoolers.
Mhm.
Yeah, lots of sweaty hands, but for some reason it stuck in my mind.
Yes.
So, so we have to go to Nashville with our partner Kristen and get a different memory for do-si-do.
Yes.
Well, thank you for answering those questions. This was just an example or a talk through, and Jenny didn't know what questions I was going to ask her.
No.
But a talk through of these questions that you can ask for yourself, and it gives you a launching pad for reflection on where do I normally sit when it looks at this situation. Am I sitting in the left hand column? Am I sitting in the right hand column? How do I shift from, assumption to curiosity, from outcome to experience? What does that look like for me? And the reason why we're using the coaching questions is because that looks different for every single individual. We cannot prescribe that to you. I can't prescribe it to Jenny. She's do-si-doing, and I love electric boogaloo. So
I would suck at that. So
so it is individualized for every individual, but that's what makes it wonderful, and that's what makes it so much fun to encounter each of us in our own creative becoming and being as we walk through the world together.
right. And I think it goes back to, who do you want to be? And if you can get clear on that, then if you find yourself on the left-hand side of this column, what do you need to shift so that you can be more of that person and that others get to enjoy that part of you?
Mhm. If this conversation has sparked something for you, just a thought that rings really true to your soul and spirit, again, we invite you to put something into the comment section that accompanies the class, or to reach out to us on LinkedIn. We love to hear your thoughts. This is a conversation between not just two people, but millions of people worldwide, if we have anything to say about it.
Yes.
So thank you so much for spending your time with us. And we hope to see you in the next session 3, where we're going to talk about something that sounds super fancy, sympathetic resonance.
Mhm.
But really what it means is, if I start to change my way of being, do others start to change theirs?
We will see.